Hello, and welcome to Week to Week. I am Mona Duncan, your host, and today I have a friend, Sue Tomasetsky, is going to join in, and we're going to be discussing a little bit about my job is not, which is a part of one of the concepts of Dr. William Glasser, lead management, and how to have more effective businesses. Get this where it will come up. The concepts of lead management. Okay, here we go. And so we're going to look here primarily okay. Diane Gaussen, in keeping with Dr. Glasser's lead management, came up with a little chart that has been very, very effective, and is to look at my job is and my job not, because sometimes we can be so involved in our job, whatever it is, that we can overstep bounds. So it's to look at what my job is and what my job is not, and then also with coworkers and staff and so forth, to look at what our job is and what your job is and what your job is not, in case there is someone that is overstepping bounds. And I like to I think back on one of the counselors with the prison system was had a complaint about one of the other counselors, and although they had brought the complaint to me because I was over the different counselors, everyone has a boss, and so there was something that was out of my purview. So I encouraged her to go ahead and talk with our boss. And she was just really frustrated because she just was absolutely sure that the manager did nothing about it. But the thing of it is once that we turn a problem over to someone else, it's out of our hands. And so in Dr. Glasser's concept of lead management, it is having full disclosure in the hiring process. It is looking at lead management is skills in persuading workers without coercion to accept the manager's agenda and to work hard and to do a quality job. But the important thing is that the initial interview is to set some boundaries. And that is in disclosing who you are, what the company is about, what the position is about, what you stand for, what the company stands for, what the mission is, so forth. What you will ask of the individual and what you will not ask of the individual. What you will do for or with the individual, and what you will not do for or with the individual. And this sets it up on initially, right at the very beginning of setting boundaries, establishing boundaries. We will do, we will not do. And it always being cognizant of leading in a way that is never criticizing, that is not asking too much, and that has no coercion to it. And so then whenever there is an issue that needs to be dealt with, you can go back to those initial hiring disclosures of what we talked about initially, of what we will do and or will not do. And so I thought we would look for just a few minutes at distinguishing between busyness and business, because our internal needs that we have, the need to make our own choices, and the need to love and be loved, and the need for power and for freedom and all that, it kind of internally compels us to always be busy, to always be doing something. And so, in a common networking meet and greet question is, what do you do? because we become associated with what we do, what we are a part of. But in the process of doing, sometimes we fail to be. And it's really important to, whatever we're doing, is to be part of who we are. When what I do is a part of who I am, then life flows more smoothly in all directions, whether it is in relationships or business or community work or volunteering or whatever. And then who you may choose to be able to choose some consequences, but you can't always choose your choices. And you may not have consciously ever decided to be fired or to be divorced or to become incarcerated or to sink in financial ruin. We may not think that we're choosing those things. However, our cumulative thoughts and the actions that we choose takes us down those difficult roads.
Mm-hmm.
So I was looking here at being a scenario. So there was one of the employees, Mr. Brown, was seeking a job, and he found a job, and they hired him to be a quality control specialist at the Roach Motel. And I put that in parentheses because that was his description. Oh yes, I've got a job, and I'm to be the quality specialist, quality control specialist at the Roach Motel. So he let me know how much he was dreading this job. And why was he dreading the job? Well, first of all, he was certain that the employers were going to be difficult. And why were they going to be difficult? Because it was from his point of view that they really did not want things to change. They just kind of wanted something there. So we did a little simple exercise of the my job is not, to determine his responsibilities versus the business's responsibilities, and to help him not get the two confused. Because responsibility, I like to look at it as I have the ability to choose how I will respond to any situation. And we really do. And lead management is more about the individual, each individual, every individual in the business, in the whole group, and how we respond and how we. So point number 3 is looking at challenging our excuses. That Mr. Brown's job is to assess the current situation and to make recommendations. That his job is to recognize that surface situations is not intent. And I misspelled, I just put is not I intent, but it's not intent. Whenever someone is telling you what the job is about or what they're wanting to do or their dreams and their goals, and you are there to be a part of the solution to those dreams and goals, the fact of recognizing that job is not necessarily looking at what the ultimate job description is or the intentions are.
Mona, can you clarify that a little bit more, please?
Yes, so the job description was called quality
control
management. Yeah, total management, and making it, a quality assessment to see what needs to be done. And so the person applied for the job. And then in applying for that job, he became to, our thoughts are always there. We're always thinking about things.
Mm-hmm.
And so in applying for what he assumed the job description would be, and in looking at the demeanor of the hotel as not being one of quality, of being run down and needing great repairs, the employee was confusing his picture of what they wanted versus not having full disclosure from the manager, from the owner, as to what they wanted.
Okay.
Okay? That the surface situation is not necessarily the intentions. It's not necessarily the full story.
Okay.
And so we're always needing more information.
So it's not necessarily the title of the job that is really explaining it. It's more of the actual job description and clarifications about what the job is, what the job isn't, and what that specific individual taking the job.
Exactly.
What is,
exactly.
what isn't.
Right, right. And it's you know, it's not confusing intentions with the pictures that we have in our mind. And so, again, my job is not. And so the employee's job is to leave the decision, you know, make some suggestions, and then leave the decisions with the employer. And his job, the employee's job, is to give up the judgmental attitude. Because as we begin to examine our own thoughts and thinking, to always be aware of my kitty cat went into the closet.
Watched your door open.
Yeah. To think it through, that if its management's aim was not for improvement, would they have even put the position in the budget? And sometimes, you know, we can be thinking things, trying to find an intention when it's not yet been discussed. And also, would they have made the effort to hire a quality control specialist to even go into that if that was not? So we need, whenever we're in those positions that we don't have enough information, we need to challenge our own excuses and look at what our own demeanor is and our own attitudes are in applying for the position. And so it's realizing to, point number 4 is time to think about and to give time, that which includes the more information. It includes knowing and discussing. And so my definition of synergy is that all of us are smarter than any of us. And so it really does take a village, regardless of what it is, whether it's in child rearing or in community efforts or in building endeavors. And so as we can be open to options and actively seek input, you know, ask the employer. If the employer is not up with lead management of already telling you what I will do and what I will not do, then as the employee, seek out input. And I like to put the word input as opposed to advice, because if we're more open to input, it's like it's something you have a choice of taking it or not taking it. As if we think someone's giving us advice, we have a tendency to think that that's something we are obligated to.
Mm-hmm.
And so to be willing to accept the fact that if it is working, even if it's just limping along, management may or may not agree to some of the suggestions that you would make, because the bottom line is they do have more information about everything, such as, you know, which includes the budget. And then always to ask permission to share your insights as to how things might improve, rather than coming up with this is what needs to be done. Because we always need to leave the end results in the hand of management or a higher authority. So, in looking at some facts, that the final decision lies with authority. And I go back to an individual that I was working with one time, and they were so frustrated because he lived with his grandmother, and his grandmother's, she had reared him, really. It was a young man that had been in prison and was now going back out into society. And he was really distraught because someone was stealing his grandmother's Social Security checks. And he was absolutely adamant that it was his cousin. And he had told the detectives and the police, and nothing was being done. And he was just really, really frustrated. And I told him that the final decision lies with authority. And one of the things that authority had is that pesky little fact of proof, that you can't just, you have to have some proof in the knowing. And we can be really frustrated whenever there are things that we don't know and we're not privy to. But it's also realizing that hiring is always a two-way street. Actually, most things in life are. That, yes, they're choosing to hire you, but guess what? You're also choosing to be hired. And so it's a working together for an amiable relationship. And that when you accept a position, yes, I will take this position, I will ask more questions about what it entails to do, then your goal automatically becomes the goal of your employer. And that will take the stress off of you if you will allow it to. That whatever their goal is, that becomes your goal to do what you are being hired to do. And then it can become a symbiotic relationship where I need you, you need me, we need each other, and we can work together. It's a symbiotic relationship of meeting your needs to serve the community, to have a job, as well as to meet your financial obligations. But it also is that symbiotic relationship of meeting the establishment's needs to provide a service or a product, as well as to make a profit. And realizing that it's all about relationship. That, and I think back in a job that I had back many moons ago, that one of the things that was my responsibility was to assist with a massive monthly mailing. And it was a big thing that took the whole entire workday and a lot of preparation prior to it. But the supervisor was a little bit askew and things did not run real smoothly. And she was set in her ways and she resisted my input. She resisted my organizational skills. And so the mailing became a dreaded project, and it was a tension headache for me, and it was continued to be frustrating for her because there had been others I was the low man on the totem pole, and so I was assigned to be a part of this mailing. And everyone else in the position had at one time, when they were low man on the totem pole, had been assigned it. And it was just kind of a, kind of against, anyway. One day I decided that since I could not control the situation anyway, that I might as well give up trying to control it and enjoy the lady's company. So as we were doing this and going back and forth to put the mailings together, it was a routine task. So it was okay in taking care of the routine task to exchange, to dialogue. So we began to exchange stories with each other and recipes and dreams. And even though it still remained kind of helter-skelter, and it wasn't as organized as it could be, the duty became enjoyable. And then one day she asked, she said, well, do you have any ideas how all of this might flow smoother? And so it's all about relationship, and it's the relationship that we have. And so self-evaluating. And again, no matter the situation, here are just some things that, that I choose to look at in self-evaluating. I
I understand completely, just completely.
Right, who's the boss here? In this
Right.
situation, I think it's the key.
Give it up. There's no lead management, here.
Right. So in self-evaluating, it is looking at how are my priorities out of order? And they can be out of order. Sometimes it can be an attitude thing or whatever. How am I trying to enforce external control of getting someone to see it my way rather than, you know, being more willing to look at their point of view? Are my values clearly defined? Or am I, you know, how self-evaluating. Is it poor planning and therefore poor execution that is kind of causing that stress or that frustration? Is it an over-exaggerated sense of self? Is it a lack of self-control? Is it a lack of having Sabbath rest, of getting enough sleep, of getting enough exercise, of getting, you know, getting enough? And so it's to continually self-evaluate and look at what may be something that I'm not seeing. And in the whole process, it's always being true to yourself. In our society, we often define people by what they do. But in the process of doing, sometimes we fail to get to know who we are and who we can become. And who we are determines a whole lot of things.
So Mona,
uh-huh.
It is really interesting though to think about it. You've said a number of times that, you know, it is the authority then that the decision will finally fall to.
Right.
You know, that it is really their decision. And so now the idea being is then the workers, how often a worker might then say, well, I can't, no matter what, they may or may not ever listen to me, why bother?
Right.
You know, so to be true to oneself, the idea of the authority always being the one to make the final decision, you know, I mean, I guess in a sense, it's the same as when the conversations are going on now about the Rittenhouse trial, you know, that what the authorities are saying is we have to trust our jury system. We have to trust our trial system. That was the decision that was made. You know, that's the system. This is the way the system works. So I don't know. It's a struggle. It's a struggle of inclusion, but the final decision being one of exclusion. Like it falls on that one person in charge.
Right, at least for a time.
Okay.
Because all systems do work perfectly for the results they produce. And sometimes the results they produce is destruction. And sometimes it is you know, and I'm not making a comment on that, on the trial itself. I'm just making the comment that everything has a system to it. And as systems are well oiled and they're all working in those non-criticizing, in those appreciating one another and working together. But we always need to be true to ourselves. And when we are being true to ourselves, it will, to a large degree, determine the type of job that we choose. And when we are true to ourselves, it will determine the quality of work that we perform. That it will be quality and that it will not be a hit and a miss. That it will be, you know, with always growing and learning and being more competent. And as we're true to ourselves, who we are determines the attitude that we have toward our labor, toward what we do, and how we interact with our co-workers and with the management and with that final authority. And who we are determines the stress level that we carry or not. or how we can let those stressors go, realizing that and who we are will determine whether or not we stay or whether or not we go.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I mean, it's complicated and it's full of all kinds of, and it's going back to looking at my job is and my job is not. And your job is and your job is not.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I've created more questions than giving.
To a degree. What is interesting, I think about John Irwin in our area was working with a number of our schools. I was doing a lot of work with bullying in the schools and what was going to happen. And what he did with Gosson's chart is he created not just my job is, your job is, my job isn't, your job isn't. He created an our job is. So in other words, it's like, if you see something, say something. And now who do you say something to? And is it your job to stand up to? You know, and because very often it's like, it's not my job to get in the middle of this. It's not my job to stop this. But yet on the other hand, if I see something, do I say something? And yes, but who do I say it to and under what conditions? You know, without being a tattletale.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So it's our job is to stand up for each other. You know, our job isn't to get hurt in the process.
Right. And
you know, it was a very interesting piece, because the idea of it just going to the authorities, you know, for those of us who have facilitated groups in any way, people's tendency would be to just kind of shrug their shoulders and go, yeah, you know, the superintendent's just going to decide. The board's just going to decide. There's nothing we can say is going to make a difference.
And that really is sad when it gets to that point. And so that's being true to self as to whether to stay or whether to go, as to whether to move on.
Yeah.
But whatever we do, to always monitor who we are so that we don't, and then always going back to that relationship, as you can go back into and talk with the authority to see what, how things have changed to a degree. You know, things can be mediated.
Yes, if they can. You know, it depends. And that's who is the leader that's been hired, and how does the leader see his or her job?
Right, right.
One of the school districts I was working with and facilitating a group, and I can't remember what the issue was, but it was back when I was using, you know, chart paper, and, you know, it was before we were doing all the techie stuff and what have you. So it was just simple chart paper. Here was the chart paper, and it was really very funny because the team of people I was working with, they said, and what are you going to do with the chart paper? I said, I'm taking it with me and I'm going to summarize it. And they said, prove it. And who are you sending the summary to? And I remember looking at the principal and going, what is going on here, you know? And what they said was the superintendent had been known to take all the chart paper and change everything that was on it. So nothing that was ever said ever came out in the notes, came out, ever. You know, and it's like, where did the chart paper go? That was what was on the chart paper. It's like, well, I guess that's why I'm here, because I've got the chart paper. And it was like, you know, then as technology came, people were taking pictures of it so that they knew who it was, or somebody would meet with me to make sure I was summarizing it.
Right, right. And that really goes back up.
It comes down to an issue of trust.
that really goes back up to the disclosures at the very beginning of the lead management, is what I will do for you, what I will not do for you. And it's looking at those, and as we can understand that, then there can be amends made.
Well, it's interesting. Sharon and I were finding in our last quality school forum, some of the conversation, and I've seen it in this month's educational leadership as well, they're talking about toxic positivity. And which is really interesting, that any number of principals and any number of leaders are like, everything's going to be okay. Sure. Let's not worry. It's all, let's be optimistic about it. And that it's disabling people from surfacing what's going wrong. And that people aren't allowed to say, this is not working. This is not going well, because now stop being negative. And they're actually referring to it as toxic positivity. So it's a real interesting play now, in terms of whose job is it to say something's bad? Whose job is it to in a sense complain?
And it's one of those mysteries of life, and how everything can be taken to extreme.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore then, gotten out of balance.
Well, it is an interesting piece, though, to use the my job, your job. Can't, like, very often we'll do roles, and who's the person who's going to be the one who's going to say, yeah, but what if, well, hold it a second, and can you assign that to somebody, especially, like, can you assign it to somebody who's more often positive than negative, who would have to work on it, but,
right. But at the same time, being willing to look at how things are not running smoothly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, thanks for your input. And I really appreciate that, adding the hour so that it makes it more conclusive, that we all have a say in how the things run, and at least be willing to listen to where the other person is coming from and consider it and think about it, maybe even sleep on it. So we'll go ahead and close out for today, and thanks for being here, and may you have good mental health.